Hello and welcome back to Beckler Guitars and Repair, and today we've got a bit of a project. So I picked up this Gretsch G5122, but it needs a lot of work. It's basically a husk. It came with some parts. There's been a lot of weird modifications done to it. So we're going to try to put this back to factory original. Let's go ahead. Alright, so I picked this one up on Facebook Marketplace, and I got it for under what this case would cost, and it came with it. It just definitely is going to need a lot of work. So here it is. This is a Gretsch G5122, Korean made. So when I went to look at this guitar, it was in a lot worse shape than I was expecting. The pictures were pretty flattering, even though it showed there was no parts with it. So along with the guitar and the case, it came with a bunch of parts in this smart looking Christmas tin. We've got a bunch of pots and wires and output jack. We've got some Gretsch knobs here. Got the original pickups, which is great, except someone cut the leads way too short. We've got a Gibson switch for some reason. Some of these pots are Gibson too. And it also came with an aftermarket trem. It's not a Bigsby. I think a Bigsby originally came with this model, so this has been swapped. And then I've got a bag with the bridge in it and the spring for the tremolo, some other bits and bobs. So we've got most of what we need to put it back together. And the guitar is in all right condition. There's no like cracks or big dings out of it. But what someone did to this thing is pretty strange. So there's been little bits and bobs kind of glued and screwed onto it everywhere. I'll show you what I mean. There's a little badge here on the shoulder horn that says Sherry. And there's just stuff like that all over this. It looks like someone at one point tried to make this into a left-handed guitar, because they've moved our output jack to this side. And if you take a look at the nut, someone filed it all out to the point where it's pretty much unusable now. But I think they were trying to make these slots bigger to make it left-handed, because the wound strings would be on this side. So I think they tried to file that out. It's got a string butler for some reason. And there looks like there was a hole for a pick guard that was mounted on the left-handed style. And here's some more stuff that looks like a fairy mounted there. We've got some sort of lion, it appears. And then on the back, it looks like someone... Whoa, whoa, whoa. And on the back, more of that weird mounted metal plaque type things. There's a look at where the Bigsby used to sit. It looks like it's been... a couple different ones have been screwed on that didn't quite fit the first one. And then on the back of the headstock, we've got this Native American fellow and Gibson machine heads. And someone used oversized screws to mount these machine heads to the headstock, and it looks like one of the screws is broken off as well. But other than all that stuff, I mean, the bones of the guitar appear to be pretty good shape. This is a laminated maple top, maple back and sides. This one's got a maple neck as well. Rosewood fingerboard. We've got the thumbnail acrylic inlays, and our original truss cover. I checked the truss rod. The truss rod is working. So, and we've got most of the parts to put it back together. So this guitar definitely is salvageable. And you know, this is a pretty good guitar actually if you found a decent one in good shape used. Like these Korean Gretsches are starting to go for a little bit more money now. The same thing that's happening to Korean guitars is what happened to Japanese guitars at one point. People realized that they're really high quality. They might be underpriced for what you're getting, and then prices start to go up. Same thing's happening with Korean guitars, especially since a lot of Korean factories are moving to other places because they're increasing the Korean wage. All this sort of thing plays into why Korean guitars are kind of increasing in value. And yeah, it's a very nice guitar. It appears to be a fully hollow body. There's just one post underneath the bridge pickup for support. Nice specs and materials used on this guitar. So it should be nice once it's put back into working order. We're going to have to do quite a bit of work to remove all the other stuff on it and fill some holes and wire everything back up, clean it up, set it up. And that's what we're going to be doing today. So let's go ahead and get on the bench and start removing all of this weird stuff. Alright, first thing I'm going to do is remove all the little things hanging off it, everything that's been bolted to it and glued to it, and I'm going to remove the string butler. I'm going to remove the machine heads because those screws on there, we're going to probably have to deal with those big oversized screw holes. They're going to have to be filled and stuff like that. So I'm just going to go ahead and just take everything off this guitar, and then we can kind of assess and see what we're looking at. So someone broke the screw off in this guy. I had to bend him a little bit to get him out, but now I've got the screw sticking out of the headstock. I should be able to pull that out with a set of pliers though. So you can pretty much have a garage sale with everything I pulled off of this guitar. And here's a look at the nut. Again, someone really cut it themselves with not the proper files. So yeah, that's not going to be usable. And I had a lot of trouble getting the last, here's all the machine heads. They're all fine. They're usable again. I'm likely going to put them back on this guitar because, yeah, they'll work just fine. But this one, where the screw was broken off, I had to pretty much pull the machine head off because there was no way to get to that screw without. I tried to use a tap kit, but it did not work because the screw hole for the machine head was just not working in that spot. So a little bit of tear out there. I do have the pieces of wood, so I'm going to glue those back in. And I'm going to fill all these oversized holes. And here's the string butler. I'm not really sure what to think about these. I get the concept. Basically, it's supposed to help the string angle on like a Gibson headstock where they kind of break off at like 45-degree angles in the nut. I don't think they work that great. I haven't had very good experiences with mine that I've had before. So yeah, I won't be using this. Alright, so this guitar is pretty much Swiss cheese with all the holes from stuff mounted to it. So what I'm going to do is take these maple skewers, go ahead and dip them in some wood glue, place them in the holes so they're nice and tight, and then take a chisel, cut them all off at the edges, wait for them to dry, and then I'm going to take some stain, try to match the color, and then finish the end so they're all nice and sealed. So this is going to take a while, there's a lot of it, so I'm just going to go ahead and get started. Alright, so there was close to 50 holes in this guitar that needed filling. So I filled them all and then color matched them and sealed them with lacquer. And of course you can still see them, but they're all sealed and filled. This one was a little bit the trickiest one. This is where the other output jack had been put. So I had to actually make a plug out of maple and seal that. And then way more in the back. And just little holes all around this thing. And here's a look at the headstock. All these have been filled. Those chips that came out, I put them back into place. And I stained and sealed that as well. So yeah, this thing is basically good to go cosmetically now. Now it's time to go ahead and start putting everything else back on. The Bigsby, the electronics. I need to make a new nut. I need to put the machine heads back on. And I'm going to start with the electronics. Alright, our holes are all repaired. Now I just put the hardware into place to make sure everything lined up and I have the correct parts because I wasn't sure. What's weird though is there's no holes on this top for the Bigsby. I don't know if they were using a Vibramate before with the other Bigsby trim, but typically on a Bigsby you have to drill into the top, and there's no screw holes for that on this, but there's also no post holes, so this is always had a floating bridge, so you need pretty much a tremolo system for that style, but there's no screw holes, so I'm not sure what the story was on the last trim, but we're going to screw this one into place. And now we're just moving on to wiring. Now, wiring a hollow body is a huge pain because there's no cavity in the back that you have access to get into the wiring. It's just basically the F holes and the pickup holes. So you kind of have to fish everything in and use strings and wires to get everything where it needs to be. It's quite annoying. So what I like to do with hollow bodies is I put a big piece of cardboard over the top, and then I put holes where all the cavities are, so I get a good representation and a proper size of what the wiring looks like. So here I've got my master volume, my master tone, so here I've got my master volume, my master tone, my neck volume, and my bridge volume, and my switch. So I'm going to put everything into place on this cardboard and wire it up and then fish it into the body. Alright, here's everything laid out the way it's going to be on the guitar. Now I am just going to use this wiring schematic I found online for a Gretsch of the same model and go ahead and wire it up. And before I go further, I'm just going to make sure these pickups are working because that's something I haven't done yet. So I'm going to put my clip on the negative and on the pot, and it seems to be reading at an 8.64 for the bridge, and then for the neck pickup and 8.12. So yeah, they seem to be good. Alright, here's the wiring all complete. It's a bit of a snarl right now because all the lengths have to be so long in a hollow body. I'm going to clean everything up with some cable ties and then when I install. But now we're going to fish this all inside the guitar. Alright, I've got this thing all wired up and back together. I put all the screws in, all the hardware, put the knobs on. I tested it and it's working just fine now, and it's certainly looking a heck of a lot better than when I got it. So let's have a quick look at the condition of this thing now. So yeah, our headstock's in decent condition. We've got our replaced Gibson tuners on there. I believe that's the original truss cover, and I put on a brand new bone nut on here. It fits just perfectly. And our rosewood fingerboard's looking pretty nice and dark and streaky, and I went ahead and polished the frets on this one. So yeah, super shiny now. And there wasn't any fret wear in this guitar too. The frets were in actually really nice shape. And a look at our little thumbnail acrylic inlay there. And then on the body, it's in pretty decent condition aside from the holes. Again, I repaired over 50 holes on this guitar. This thing was just pin cushioned. But now that all the holes are color matched and sealed, they're kind of hard to see. If you get really close, you can definitely see they're still there, but for the most part, they blend in pretty well. You gotta look for them. There's another one there, and another one there. And let's have a look at the back. No holes in the back. It's actually quite a nice grain on this guitar. I really like the color too. Kind of looks like a country gentleman. And I did install this. Someone had installed this output jack on the other side. I think they're going to try to make it a lefty. So I put it back over on this side. I actually filled all the holes, including the output jack, kind of by accident. I plugged it. So I had to re-drill it just to put this output jack in, but it worked out okay. It looks good. And the neck is pristine. There's no marks or dings on the neck at all. So that's a maple neck on this guitar. And yeah, this thing with the machine heads off was just a mess. We had some tear out here. Again, you can see that if you get close, where I had to rebuild up that spot. I had put the two pieces that had tore out back in place and color matched and sealed it. There's those two holes that were holding up that figure there. And we've got our machine heads, which are the Gibson Deluxe vintage style. And all those holes have been filled and re-drilled because they were using huge screws to put those in, so it had to be done. But it turned out quite well, I'd say. You can still see on the sides all the places where there was holes, but again, they're color matched and sealed. If you look right in the light, they're pretty noticeable, but at a glance, they blend in pretty nicely. And then there was just a whole bunch here by our tail piece here, where it mounts to the body. But you can still see a couple. But overall, it looks infinitely better from when I got it. But the important things are in good condition, like there's no structural cracks or repairs. The neck's in good shape, the frets are all good. So I think this is going to be a pretty nice playing guitar when we're done. So all that's left to do is give it a restring and a setup. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then we can take the specs on this guitar and try it out. Alright, I've got this thing all strung up and playing to where I want it to be now. So it required a little bit of a setup. I had to set the intonation. It's a little tricky on these floating bridges because you actually have to physically move them forward or back to get the intonation where you need it to be. I usually find a good rule of thumb is lining it up with the center F holes is usually pretty close to where it's going to be perfectly intonated. And then you can adjust the saddles from there. A couple things I had to do to this guitar to get it playing the way I wanted it to. The bridge spring that came with it was way too big. So the trem was sitting like way up here. So I actually ground down the coil, a few lengths of coil around the spring with my bench grinder. So now it's sitting a lot more where I want it to be. And the bone nut, I had to cut these slots pretty deep to get the action where I want it to be. So I went over that with a Dremel tool so that the strings are just barely sitting in the slots in the nut. This headstock has a pretty extreme break angle, which is why I think they had a string butler on it before. But as long as the nut's cut well, I find that you don't get a lot of tuning instability issues. I also angled the slots towards the respective machine heads so that that break angle is a little bit less extreme, so it doesn't bind as much there. And the nut slots are very shallow, so there's not a lot of resistance there either. So this is a great way to improve your tuning stability if you're finding your guitar's not staying in tune well. If you make those nut slots a little bit more shallow so that the string is just resting in barely in there, that can help. Alright, I'm just going to run up and down the fingerboard, making sure there's no buzzing or fretting out anywhere. I like to speed up this part, but if you want to hear it in real time, slow down your player to 25%. So yeah, very nice, low action and no buzzing or fretting out anywhere. The guitar rings out quite nicely as well. A little bit of a darker sound. But yeah, okay, now that everything's all together, let's go ahead and get the weight, get some neck specs, and then we'll plug it in and see how it sounds. And it's quite light, weighing in just a hair over 7 pounds, or 3.18 kilograms. Width at the nut is a 1.71 or a 43.48 millimeters. And at the 12th fret, that's a 2.05 or a 52.27 millimeters. Neck depth at the 1st fret is a 0.83 inches or 21.21 millimeters. And at the 12th fret, that is a 0.90 inches or a 22.91 millimeters. And here's a look at the neck profile. It starts out pretty rounded C, pretty standard, and then it flattens out a little bit by the 12th. But it's a pretty standard neck profile. And it feels a lot like a 60s style neck from Gibson. Pretty similar. Alright, today we're going back to the 65 Deluxe Reverb. I haven't played it in a while, so I'm gonna try that out with this Gretsch. Alright, we'll just go through each pickup clean and then with a little bit of dirt so we can hear how it sounds. So yeah, sounds very clean. These pickups are a little bit darker sounding, but they still sound really, really nice. I'm going to go ahead and try it with a little bit of overdrive now. Alright, so this guitar was a ton of work. I mean, when I got it, it was basically a husk. No electronics, holes all over it, 50 plus holes on this guitar that I had to fill. The machine heads were all screwed out with oversized screws. I had to repair all those holes too. There was a bunch of pull out when I removed one of the machine heads because one of the screws had broken off. I had to rebuild that area of the headstock there, fill it in, color matched it. Wiring a hollow body is also such a pain. You have to fish everything into the F-holes. And this thing was definitely time consuming. But now that it's all back together and put together properly, it's a really solid hollow guitar. Yeah, it plays and sounds great. This is the Korean era of Gretsch. And these guitars are getting a little bit more sought after because they don't make them in Korea anymore. People are just sort of recognizing how good Korean guitars are. Nowadays, same thing kind of happened with Japan and Japanese guitars. And yeah, it plays great. The fretwork was really nice on this guitar. I just polished it up a little bit, but the frets are super flat and straight, and it plays great with really nice low action. The Gibson machine heads work great. It's got a new bone nut on there. Again, I cut this pretty shallow for the nut slots, so it stays in tune a little bit better, and I angled the nut slots toward the machine, so this guitar actually stays in tune really well even with the Bigsby. The Bigsby is an aftermarket Bigsby, although it's pretty similar to like a normal Bigsby. It's all the components are pretty similar, so I imagine it's not much worse than a Bigsby. And you know, at a glance, you can't really tell that it had 50 holes in it at one point. You gotta get pretty close and kind of in the light before you can start seeing. So I'm happy with the way it turned out. It's definitely a really nice kind of player's grade Gretsch. I think it's a very solid guitar. And this comes with a hard shell case as well. If you're interested in this guitar, I'm going to have it up for sale on the Reverb page. I'll put the link in the description like I normally do. But other than that, thanks for tuning in to Beckler Guitars and Repair. And I'll have more for you really soon. Thanks a lot.